Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another exciting podcast interview. On today's show, I have Aaron Baldwin. He's the Chief Product Officer at automotiveMastermind. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Great to be here.
You know, recently I had you down on the CBT News set, recording an episode for Auto Marketing Now. That was a great conversation. We got a lot of positive feedback on this. Well, opening up a broader discussion on what Automotive Masterminds is. You know, so many dealers think, oh, yeah, I use them for equity mining. But man, from our conversations over the last few months, Automotive Masterminds has a much broader vision. And that's what I want to talk about today on the podcast, so dealers know really your roadmap to be a full sales enablement platform. When you're talking to dealers today who think that, well, you're just an equity mining company, how do you respond to them?
That's a great question, Brian. And it's a common misconception because of how we've been categorized over time. But when a dealer asks me, or brings up that you guys are equity mining, when you take a look at the predictions that we make, it's far beyond just equity mining. We're looking at garaging data from our sister companies within S&P Global Mobility like Polk, to really understand the buying habits, the automotive specific buying habits of those consumers, and ultimately predict who's going to be in market and when, so that we can start reaching out to that person and letting the dealer know who these folks are before they ever enter the market. And I think that's one of the most key components of that, because they don't end up inside of that big marketing, automotive marketing cog that introduces competition and makes it harder to retain that dealer's own loyalty.
You bring up a good point. All-time historical lows for dealer loyalty, brand loyalty. I think some of that damage more recently is done because of the lack of inventory, forcing consumers who needed a car to go to a different dealer. MSRP plus pricing. There's now a number of studies coming out about the negative long tail impact of that. And then, of course, just more choice, new EV models coming on market, confusion in the marketplace on whether one brand is ahead or not. And it comes down to looking much more carefully at the data that dealers have, their first party customer data. Aaron, I've been doing a lot of research on customer data platforms. That will be one of the topics we're going to talk about today. But it seemed clear to me that dealers have pieces of the customer journey spread across 12 or so different software platforms. It's been really tough for them to take all these signals and make intelligent business decisions or automate certain workflows. And that seems to be the sweet spot for Automotive Masterminds in a future state. Do you see Automotive Masterminds using its BI, its predictive analytics, to point into the rise of customer data platforms, meaning you'll be the data activation choice of dealers, turning data into dollars? You just don't care where the data sits. Tell me a little bit more about what you see the future looking like.
Yeah, Brian, happy to do that. And you brought up a really great point in all of that. And as we've been going through this roadmap and determining exactly how we can best support dealers going forward, we started looking at some of our own data, which I'm not going to give up too much of it, so that there's a good nugget on at DMSC. But we're looking about 3 to 5 years ahead right now to see how a dealer's portfolio across all deal types, lease, finance, cash, where they're going to be able to retain and where they're going to have to start looking at acquiring new customers, and to make sure that they don't have any major dips in their volume and in their performance, and again, making sure that we're looking at that a few years down the road. And as it comes to the customer data platforms and the CDPs, Mastermind certainly has to have one inherently built internally to do what we do, but we certainly see ourselves as that data activation partner, that core integrator that works with whichever dealer CDP they have chosen to extract data from that, to make sure that we're on the right page, to make sure that the marketing communications are all in line and we're not creating confusion. And, as well as pumping our intelligence back into those platforms so that the dealer's data is, best served within that CDP. And the amount of business intelligence and analytics we'll be able to glean off of that, especially with all those connection points being in one location and having that true single source of truth for the customer, really just makes our predictions even stronger. It's almost like a 1 + 1 = 10 scenario.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. There's a friend of mine, Jeff Williams. He's a consultant out of Canada. He advises dealerships in the US, Canada, around the world. And he talked about a mindset shift. And I think it aligns with what you're talking about is instead of just looking at customers as sold prospects or former leads turned customers, this idea of managing a portfolio, when you think of our retirement accounts, maybe our stock accounts where you purchase certain stocks because you believe over a certain number of time it will return a certain growth rate, which will set you up for retirement. How come more dealers don't look at their DMS, their customers, as a portfolio to optimize instead of, hey, let me just send out emails to everyone based on these broad categories? It's almost like they're painting all their customers with a rather wide brush, whereas we would never do that for our stock portfolio. Let's sell all tech, or let's sell all consumer products goods because maybe one target, companies had a problem. I think the conversation needs to be, how do we start looking at our customers as a portfolio that can be optimized?
Yeah. The reason why we haven't, as dealers and in automotive, looked at it that way, I think just boils down to education, Brian. Now that you're bringing to light a lot of opportunities with customer data platforms and really understanding who these consumers are and managing that data correctly, I think it's giving a great magnifying glass onto the value of the customers within each of these dealers' DMSs and within these portfolios themselves. Being part of S&P Global, we adopt somewhat of a portfolio mindset automatically, and it's also been built inherently into us since day one when Marco and Johannes founded automotiveMastermind a little over 10 years ago. But to your point, looking at it as that portfolio, you can start to identify certainly groups of customers. If you take that retirement example that you mentioned about, well, we wouldn't want to sell all tech. There maybe it's just one company within that segment that's having trouble that I shouldn't focus on. And I should continue to focus on the others. We look at it very similarly. So if you break down those segments, each individual within that segment has their own unique properties and their own unique characteristics and behaviors. So who do I focus on and bring the right attention to and spend my marketing dollars on so that I can have the best possible yield afterwards is absolutely how dealers should view their first-party data.
What are the other elements? I didn't spend too much time on it in my research report, is that when you consider all of your data in one place, which is not the case today, but as dealers embrace CDPs, data security really elevates in the dealer conversation and planning. That's why I'm somewhat concerned with the number of players that are coming to market, yet they don't have the proper security certifications in place. Their investments in firewalling and kind of hacker deterrence is kind of unknown yet. Because Automotive Masterminds is part of a larger global company, S&P Global Mobility, I mean, data security is a cornerstone. That has to give dealers a little bit more comfort that if they're going to partner with somebody who's going to turn their data into dollars, connecting into the CDP, the right security and workflows are in place to make sure that the dealer's data is protected. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for making the connection to the broader global business, because just being part of that broader global business, our sister companies have contracts with government agencies, with major investment firms. So the amount of scrutiny that's placed on all of our systems is incredibly high. But when we bring it into the automotive use case, and this is something I really wanted to, I'm really going to highlight at DMSC, is around data security. These portfolios and where dealers are sending their first party data to, you really need to make sure that that is well protected, and that not only is it well protected when it sits on their servers, but when it's in transit between your system and theirs. Is it being done through a secure API versus flat file transfers like CSVs and FTPs? APIs are by far more secure because they're transmitting single records or arrays of records that are pretty well protected. And then you mentioned some of these policies and procedures. There's a number of policies that are out there that are well regarded as industry standard, like ISO or SOC, and dealers just asking the question, what are your data security policies? Do you have a SOC 2 Type 2? If so, which disciplines are you certified in? And can you provide me that certification letter from an independent third party? And the same thing goes for ISO. It's a great way to sanity check, are the people that I'm giving my data to perform this action going to have the security of it in my best interest? And we talk about security, but you can pack it pretty quickly into into financials. And if there's a data breach with one of those vendors, ultimately the dealer is going to be the one who has to answer for that. Now, there's certain things you can do within your contracts to try to mitigate the risk, but at the end of the day, you're talking about something that would be very public and quite frankly, very, very expensive, easily into the 7-8 figure range.
Yeah, something we definitely will be spending a little bit more time on in a follow-up research report on CDPs, talking about data security, data transport, how often does data hygiene practices need to be implemented. There's a lot to unpack in the coming months. One of the celebratory moments that just passed was the acquisition of MarketScan by S&P Global Mobility. Hats off to Rusty West and the entire team. Karsten, who is a dear friend and works with him on the marketing side. They've been a sponsor of our conferences, just doing great things in the marketplace. What could you tell our listeners today on what plans do you have for their real-time, payments as a service technology in the Mastermind portfolio or in the broader portfolio for S&P Global Mobility?
Yeah. First off, just to echo your point, hats off to Rusty and the entire MarketScan team for just building an absolutely fantastic company and fantastic technology. And we certainly see an immense amount of synergies between that business and not just the Automotive Mastermind business, but all of the S&P Global Mobility portfolio companies. We don't really play in the same areas. So all of the customers that MarketScan currently supports, they will continue to be supported in the same great fashion that they've been used to and that they currently serve. And then from an internal perspective, we're able to get so much smarter because of the accuracy, the speed in which Market Scan runs. So when we talked about, our behavior prediction score, our predictions that let us know who's going to be in market, when, and for what vehicle, we're now able to get much more intelligent about at what price, and take, deal structures and setups from 5 years ago and really extrapolate that into what does that mean today, and how sensitive to payments and price is this particular consumer versus another one? Is this somebody who needs a few extra dollars to push them over the edge? Or is this somebody who has a demographic profile change where, that $150, $200 additional payment walk isn't necessarily as meaningful? So we certainly get that benefit from now being partnered very tightly with Market Scan. And then as far as Mastermind's calculations themselves, as Market Scan technology powers a lot of desking solutions within the country, a lot of payment systems within the country. So powering the Mastermind payment systems will allow us to be much more accurate against what the consumer is actually going to see when they come into the store. So making that, quoting from demand generation and interest all the way through to desking and contracting more of a consistent number to improve the overall consumer experience.
Well, that's really exciting to kind of see how S&P Global Mobility has been, building a really smart network of technologies and data, excellence that can power the next generation of automotive retail. When we loop back for a moment and step back, I see Automotive Masterminds as a sales enablement platform with many use cases, because dealers, once they have unified data, or as you help them clean up data with the data sources from S&P Global Mobility, dealers are really going to need, advanced partnerships like yourself to turn that data into dollars. I don't want to minimize the fact that CDPs in themselves unified data and can create some broad segments. But if we really want to leverage the data, we have to bring in outside predictive models, analytics, machine learning. How do you explain to a dealer that clean data and unified data is one thing, and we need to move there, but trying to take years and years of what your data scientists have done and try to replicate that by simple segmenting on data fields isn't what Automotive Masterminds does, and it's not something that's easily replicated.
Yeah, to your point, step one is clean data. Without clean data, we can't do what we need to do from a predictions perspective, because it just makes the prediction inherently bad in of itself.
Right.
So we've been cleaning any data that comes in-house for a very long time, and making sure that we've got the cleanest potential sources that we're extrapolating our predictions from as we bring on a new dealer on board and start taking in DMS feeds and understanding who everybody is inside of that portfolio. But as far as the predictions go, when you talk about those basic segments, I almost like to think about it as basic arithmetic, basic algebra. It's pretty easy to determine. I need to figure out who my lease maturity customers are, who's in equity, or is this APR lower than what available now lower than what the customer currently has. It's pretty straightforward to get those broad segments. But when you really drill into it and layer in a bunch of outside data, like demographic data, like garaging data, as our sister company Polk is one of, if not the oldest business has been cataloging registration data, we can really start to see and understand more refined cases of where somebody needs to come into market because they moved, or there's a new dependent in the household, and that's irregardless of their current lease contract or where they may or may not be within an equity position. So you can really start to refine out a lot of, very granular detail about individuals to create those predictions. And then even creating those predictions, you've got to make sure that the communication that comes out from that echoes the amount of effort that was put into the prediction, so that you can talk to that person in a one-to-one fashion. And that is just critically important when you're making these types of outreach, that you show that you truly understand and care about that customer's current position and why they may be in market to purchase a new vehicle.
And one of the other things that dealers need to understand is that, as a division of S&P Global Mobility, you have access to testing a lot of data that would, cost the dealers a lot of money. And, one of the things I love that, dealers can know whether a customer who's not servicing their car, are they servicing at an independent facility or at another dealer? Like they don't have that data. You mentioned when people move. There's lots of other triggers that can happen in the file. And also dealers should know that, hey, when you're sending out service reminders, you're sending it out to people who already sold their car to you or already sold the car to someone else. And all of these data elements come from outside partnerships. And these outside partnerships, as you know, are powered by many of the internal companies within inside S&P Global Mobility. Aaron, one last thing, over the years, dealers have said to me, hey, I've been really pleased with what Automotive Masterminds is doing. And I think they didn't understand all the things that you can do, but they felt that, hey, you're a good partner. For the dealership managers who are listening to today's podcast, I think they need to get a more, let's say, updated view of what the company can do for them. What's the best way for them to kind of get back up to speed, especially the ones who might say, well, look, the only thing I think Automotive Masterminds does is equity mining. And we've talked about so many more applications to generate new revenue sources. What's the channel that would be best for them to learn more, especially those who are not current customers?
Yeah. No, thank you for asking, Brian. Our website, automotivemastermind.com. You can access us there at any time. We have our phone numbers listed there. We have live chat support there, and we would be happy to connect with anyone who wants to talk about it. Anyone can feel free to reach out to me, as I've always offered. I maintain an open door policy for everybody. Always exciting to talk to folks in the industry. But also, one of the things that we've really prided ourselves on is our in-field support. So if you're a current dealer and want to learn more about what we're doing and what our roadmap looks like, our dealer relations managers, you should probably have their contact. They'd be happy to connect with you and share more with that, as well as with their best practices that they're in the stores training on regularly. And then we have our normal field teams that are out there on the ground all across the country who can help with new dealers as well. But probably the easiest place to access it, as a place to start, automotivemastermind.com, and just please reach out to us. We'd be happy to connect and happy to share more about what we're up to.
Wonderful. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being a part of this data first transformation as dealers move to better managing and activating their first party data, and the rise of business intelligence tools that are creating new revenue sources for dealers that were never previously possible. This conversation aligns perfectly with one of the major themes of the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference coming up May 21, 22, 23 in Austin, Texas. We're excited to bring our 10-year plus conference from the Napa Valley into Austin, Texas. Cheaper airfare, cheaper hotels, easier access, more availability for dealership employees, managers, and owners. I just want to encourage you, the event will sell out. We already went through our first room block So we're putting a new room block on the website. Get your tickets and rooms locked in. It's going to be an exciting time because one of the major themes is first-party data management, the rise of CDPs in automotive retail, and marketing automation advances, all which fall into the purview of the team at Automotive Mastermind. So don't miss the opportunity to learn with your peers, experience, well, a unique opportunity to learn what the future of automotive retail looks like, surrounding tools that can create a better customer experience. And you can go to digitalmarketingstrategies.org and use promo code FOMO200, that's FOMO 200, to save $200 off your tickets. And if this is the first time you're listening to one of my podcasts, you should know that there are dozens of interviews with industry leaders, transformers, and, well, first-party data enhancement partners like Automotive Mastermind. And they're all available on the Apple Podcast channel, Google Play Store. You could just search for the Brian Pash Podcast or go to brianpash.libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com for all of those episodes, especially those designed to introduce you to the speakers who'll be on stage at DMSC 2023. And don't forget to download the CDP research report. It's available at thepashgroup.com. That's pashgroup.com, and download the Rise of CDPs and Automotive Retail Research Report. Aaron, thanks so much for being on the show. You looking forward to Austin?
Very much, Brian. I've enjoyed coming to that conference back when I was in Napa, and looking forward to a bigger venue.
Yep, it's going to be a rock star event. Well, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and I'll catch you next time on another podcast interview. Have a great day.